Paul Krugman, I think on Friday, said that the number one risk to the US economy is that the Fed could overdo it because inflation could come down as quickly as it went up. Is that really possible?
Well, we'd certainly welcome inflation coming down more quickly than expected, and we would take that into account in our policy. So look, as I mentioned earlier, we're very strongly committed to using our tools to get inflation to come down. The way to do that is to slow down growth, ideally keep it positive, and as I mentioned, supply and demand get back into balance. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. Is there a risk that we would go too far? Certainly there's a risk. But I wouldn't agree that it's the biggest risk to the economy. I think that, the bigger mistake to make, let's put it that way, would be to fail to restore price stability. And it's what Augustine was speaking to earlier, a low inflation environment or regime is what we've had. And that is one in which inflation is low and no one pays any attention to inflation, and that's called rational inattention because it doesn't matter. No. When there's a big inflation spike, if it's going to go away, we would ignore it and sort of play through it because it'll go away and it won't affect people's understanding. But to the extent there are a series of shocks, it does become rational for people to pay more and more attention. And I think the clock is kind of running on. How long will you remain in a low inflation regime where most of the changes in inflation are actually idiosyncratic as opposed to broadly across the macroeconomy? So the risk is that because of a multiplicity of shocks, you start to transition into a higher inflation regime. And our job is literally to prevent that from happening, and we will prevent that from happening. We will not allow a transition from a low inflation environment into a high inflation environment.